Hello, everyone. I wanted to go over the BP that I wrote for kind of wrapping the new UDS radial storm and what it offers. But first of all, this here is the setup that is provided by the UDS creator for creating a radial storm. I'm just going to go over the basics of this, and probably be there'll probably be plenty of scenarios where you don't need to use my special BP that wraps this and just call this function directly. So first of all, let's just go over what this does. So the spawn transform is essentially your start location, your XY start location, and your Z rotation of the storm. Storm weather, again, is the weather type, such as thunderstorm. The outer and inner radius. The outer and inner radius decide how large your circular storm is. The outer radius, it's very similar to override storms, where the override storm has a kind of an outer zone, and then the inner zone. Basically, the inner zone is where your really thunderstorm is most predominant. The outer storm is kind of your transition zone. So if you want a longer transition zone before you get to the full thunderstorm, you increase your outer radius. And if you want a smaller thunderstorm, full thunderstorm on the inside, you decrease your inner radius. And the fade in duration is how long in seconds does it take for the storm to come into an existence. Then the target location is where you want the storm to end up. And then the fade out duration again is how long you want the storm to take to cease to exist. The fade out by end of movement means that the storm at the end of the movement will completely cease to exist, and basically that actually destroys the spawned actor because you're actually spawning the storm like you normally spawn it. And if you have fade out by end of movement, it actually destroys that actor, which is a good thing. The movement duration is again how fast it's going to travel between your start location, your spawn location, and your target location. The longer the movement duration, the slower the storm's going to travel. The shorter, the faster it's going to travel. Okay, so in a lot of cases, like if you have maybe a trigger box and your storm's always going to start at location this and end at location that, and it's going to move at a set speed, then just use this directly. You don't even need a blueprint. In your blueprint, you just call this and spawn it, and everything gets done. Um, okay, so what are the advantages of the BP that I've kind of written to wrap it? So let's take a look at that. Um, so you've got some settings here. Use wind speed to calculate duration movement. So basically, um, to get started, basically you can drag and drop the BP onto your scene, the spawn move radial storm, and that's going to be in the global environmental system blueprints, and just drag and drop that onto your scene. Okay, so what we can do here is basically to determine that movement speed, how fast the storm moves from point A to point B, we can use the UDW weather wind speed. So let's say you're in clear skies like I am now, and the wind speed would be 2, then you can use 2 to calculate the movement duration. So the higher the wind speed, the shorter the duration is going to be. And this is just kind of a calculation I made up that looks good. I mean, there's no real fancy math or anything done to it. I'll show you here's all I'm doing is right here, I'm taking the distance to travel that we've set or determined between point A and point B, and I'm dividing it by a number. In this case, I chose 10 because basically what that's doing is taking centimeters, and normally centimeters divided by 100 would turn it into meters. So 1,000 centimeters divided by 100 would be actually 10 meters, but I'm actually doing it by 10, so you actually end up getting 1 meter per. Yeah, is that right? Yeah. So um, so basically, it's changing it to be a little bit, so the duration's a little bit shorter, I think. Now I'm kind of confused what I said. But anyway, you can see how we change that. So let's see, we've got divide distance by travel. If you want it to be 100, then you get, a shorter duration movement, 10. So that's kind of why I've set it at that. Because this is just because when I run a storm um, at wind speed of 2, it just feels right to have a duration movement of 1,000 based off of the distance to travel. So I've got a 20,000 centimeter distance, and as I showed you before, that on the map, that kind of basically equals um, roughly. Let me zoom out a little bit more on my map. From like basically here to over here. So you can see. It's not a lot, not a great distance, and this is a 2K map. So, and you can see that the duration will change again if I increase my distance. So it was 20,000. This is going to be 200,000. And you can see that now, because it's a longer distance, I want a longer movement transition. Again, if we increase the speed, you know, it's going to decrease the movement duration. So again, this is just a guess. That's all it is. So you could take this and take the distance of travel and the wind speed and do whatever calculations you want that you seem appropriate to set the movement duration. That's completely entirely up to you. I just kind of gave you a couple options here. Basically, the divide distance by travel and the distance you travel to determine uh, what I think the movement duration should be. And of course, you don't have to use that. You can uncheck that, and then basically you can set this distance, the movement durations to whatever you want. Um, so that's that. All right. Then use direction. Okay. So normal, based on his functions, you pass in a spawn location and a target location. So that gives you where it's going to travel. But maybe in your game, you might have a start location, but you don't necessarily know where the end location is going to be. Maybe you know the direction you want it to travel in because maybe the outside wind direction is going in a certain location. Like I said, maybe it's clear skies with a wind speed of 2, or maybe a wind speed of 3, and a directions in certain directions, and you want to spawn the radial storm, and you want it to go in that direction, but you don't necessarily know an endpoint. You kind of have your idea of your start point, but you don't know your end point. You just want it to go in that direction. So by just putting in a distance you want it to travel, the distance you want it to travel from your start location to across the map, then based on whatever your direction is, if your one direction is over here, it'll go from here to here without you actually having to specify, this spot here as a target location. It'll determine your target location based on the distance to travel and the z direction of that you pass into it. In this case, wind direction. But you could pass in anything to it. It doesn't have to be wind direction. You can pass in any manual direction between 0 and 360. Um, so this is not directly tied to GES, although I will show you later on that basically what we're going to do is when we spawn a new storm, we are going to pass in the current wind speed from UDS and the current from GES and the current wind speed from current direction from GES and set this wind direction and set this wind speed. The nice thing about this blueprint is you can kind of just without spawning a storm, you can see how the values change before you actually spawn a storm to see what they look like. So we've got the wind directions. We've got use distance or target location. So right now we're using distance, so we're setting 200,000 as a distance. If we want to just use the normal target location, again, just basically setting this actual x and y point, then we uncheck use distance, and we just set our uh, target location right here. So you can see that if we use distance, right, and we got our target location right here, okay, it will change. The target location will be calculated based on changing our distance. So let's set it to 20,000. You'll see that the x changes. Let's change the Where's my direction? Direction, we'll change that to, so we're at negative 111, so we'll change it to 180. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let's do 60. Okay, because 180 would be the same. Um, 6168, just the minus or plus. So then 90, like that. See things change. So we see things. So basically, based on the distance here and the direction, we're calculating a new target location. If you don't want to use that, you just put in your target location manually. All right, and your spawn transform location, again, that's where your start location is. And the only thing other I think it really takes is the rotation, the Z rotation. I think that's pretty much all the things that you would set on that normally. Then you've got the weather type you want for the storm, and again the outer and inner radius, the fade duration, fade out duration, and whether you want it to fade out by end of movement. Okay, so just as an example, on this blueprint, so I just got some default stuff set. Let's see, what am I oops, let's see. Yeah, I'm calculating that. So I don't know. One direction, default to 0. Okay. So just got a few things to start, and all I do is set my target location. I've got some random target location, and my scene it won't be the same as yours. I think it's like right here. Um, and then you can just drop it in your level and yikes, play around with the settings. And so by default, I have on this VP, I have in the event graph just to basically spawn the storm. Okay, and this construction script basically, if I have it firing off the construction strip here just so that we get these values updated. But if you're actually, but you don't want to actually try to spawn the storm when you're playing around here just to see the values calculated. So that's why in the constructor I'm telling it is a construction script, and so I don't try to spawn the storm. And when it's in the event graph, when I do want to spawn the storm, then I tell it's not in there. Um, so, so basically in my begin play, I am calling the calc radial storm function, which is then getting all the values here from the BP and spawning the storm. So in your case, you're probably not going to want to, have this on the BP here or have it on here basically, or actually either one on here. You're going to want to have probably your own PP that then calls this one to spawn the storms based on whatever you want. For example, you're going to have maybe your own PP with maybe a trigger box, and in that trigger box, you're going to call this BP and then set the values on this BP and then call the radial storm function, and then it'll trigger, it'll spawn the new storm. So again, this is an example. You probably want to disconnect this for your own purposes. So, in this case, something like you might want to do something like this. This is just a test. Let's see, test. Okay, so here's your game, and in your game, you've got a bunch of logic about when you want to spawn a storm and when you don't. Enter this trigger box, get to this point, player location, whatever it is. So, in your in your whatever your event is, whatever event you're using to spawn a storm. And like I said, it might be event begin play, it might be trigger box, but so all you basically do is get actor of class right here, and then get the what did I call? I don't even remember what I called the name of it. Spawn move UDS radial storm. So we just do, and the blueprint. That blueprint needs to be in your scene. Okay, right there. And then so, okay, and let me actually go back to this one and disconnect that. Okay, so we're not actually running it on event begin play there. We're going to run it as if it's your own custom game logic in your custom BP to trigger out storms. So let's go back to that. So we're going to grab the spawn move UDS thing, and then we are going to set all the different variables we want to set. So if you look at the actual BP, again, we've got use wind speed, pass in the wind speed, distance to travel by, and again, you can leave the defaults to these, so you don't have to set them. Since if you've got everything set the way you want it here, that's fine. But each time you spawn a storm, you're probably going to want to spawn a new storm. But you could, maybe leave this the same. Leave all these as defaults. Uh, and basically, in this case, all you would need to do is change the wind speed, and that would calculate the movement duration, change the direction for the new storm, and everything would be calculated, and then change maybe the size and that. So in this case, since we've got it the default to use wind speed, that's good. We've got it defaulted to use direction, and we've got it defaulted to use distance target location. So again, in this case, the only things I'm going to want to change when I spawn a new storm is going to be wind speed. Um, let's see, direct wind direction and distance to travel, and then my spawn transform and my um, spawn transfer location and my target location. So, and then my storm weather. In this case, I'm not going to change storm weather and outer and inner radius and all this stuff. And in this case, I'm just going to leave this as a default. So again, let's see. Here's the variables that I want. So I want wind speed. So I'm going to grab off this and do wind speed, and I'm going to set my wind speed, and then okay, and I'll set that to whatever I want, and then I'm just going to continue and do wind direction. All right, set that. And what were the other ones? So I've got my wind speed, my wind direction, distance to travel. Okay, so distance to travel. Um, and let's see, my spawn transform. So do set my spawn transform. And since I'm using distance to travel, I don't need to set a target location. All right. And I'm just going to use the same. Let's just pick a different spot. I don't know, let's use that way up there. Well, let me just pick a different spot. I'm just going to go move this over here somewhere. There we go. So I'm just going to use that as my start spawn spot. Do that. And then for my spawn transform, um, um, the only thing I'm going to change is my X and Y location. So we're going to use the starting location as the cube. All right. All right, and then the distance to travel, I'm going to use 20,000 again. I'll just use 30,000 just to say 30. 1, 2, 3, 30,000. Okay, we're going to use a wind speed of, well, start with 2. And, excuse me, a direction of, I think I wanted 180 because I wanted to go back across and a wind speed of 2. Okay, and we'll just connect all that up. Right. Okay, and then we want to call the function calc radial storm. We want to do one other thing. Actually, I want to make sure that isConstructor script is false. Is function strip. Make sure that's set to false as well. So we know we want to actually spawn the storm, and we're not just in the constructor. Oops. Wait, what did I just do? There. Let's just move this down here. Oh, okay. I just totally screwed everything up. Let me just unconnecting. Okay. So I started here. Doop, down, down, down. Ah, okay. Down, down. And then I want to run my script. Go up here and do that. Okay. So basically we're setting the wind speed, the wind direction, the distance, spawn transform, and make sure its construction script is set default so it'll spawn. So again, the one nice thing about having the blueprint in there is that you can sit there and take these values, these change values, and just put it in the in this one, and then you can see what the movement duration will be before you actually spawn it. Just kind of like a test run here to see what your values are going to be. So now I'm going to go ahead and drag in. Let me compile this. Uh, oh, target, right. Yep, need to do that. Nope. Let's try that again. Okay. So now I just drag in my test BP. And since I've got it to spawn an event begin play, it should spawn one storm. I mean, you could have it like spawn on key press or again trigger box or whatever. And once this storm spawned, you could spawn another one and another one and another one just by calling you know by grabbing the instance of MyBP, setting the variables, and calling that. And again, the advantages of MyBP are only basically that you can use the wind speed to do a movement calculation. You can set a direction and distance to basically determine your endpoint instead of just having I mean that's really the only advantage of it. If you don't care about setting the wind speed or using the direction to determine the target location, you already know what everything is, then you have no reason really to use this BP. All right. The other thing is here on the wind direction and wind speed, if you're using like GES, for example, before I fully go into this, if you're using GES, you can do another thing, and that's just do get actor of class, GES, okay, and get the I think it's get weather wind speed, and then I think it's get weather wind speed. I need to look at it. I mean, it's basically you could just get the UDS wind speed and UDS direction. I mean, you could add that in there as well. I mean, it's really the same thing. I'm just doing a couple things in the event graph. What do I just forgot what I was using. So here's wind direction change. I'm setting a variable called current wind direction. So current wind direction and wind speed change. I'm setting current wind speed. So in this case, it would be uh, current wind direction and current wind speed. And then, you would hook that up and then hook this up to wind direction and wind speed. So that would use, anything from GES. Now, the one thing about this is when you spawn the initial storm, it's going to take the initial wind speed and the initial direction, and it's going to use that. So if you change in GES if you change, or UDW, if you change the wind speed or the wind direction, it's not going to change the wind speed or wind direction of the storm that's initially spawned. The storm will have to, but if you spawn a new storm, the new storm will take on the new wind direction and the new speed. Even if the other storm hasn't ended yet, you can spawn as many storms as you want with different wind directions and wind speeds. So once you spawn the initial storm, it's going to stay on that direction at that initial speed. So let's say we spawn this storm at 2 and one direction of 180, and then maybe we've now and that storm's running its course, and now we want to spawn another one, and now we've increased our wind direction to 5, or wind speed to 5, and wind direction to 90. We spawn a new storm, then it'll spawn a second storm with that wind speed and that direction. So I have two different two different storms going at two different directions, two different speeds. If you change wind direction again, but you choose not to spawn a new storm, it's not going to affect the existing storm's wind speed or wind direction. They'll keep on going. So it's basically kind of once you spawn the storm, the wind speed and wind direction are fixed. The calculations are fixed. It's not going to change if you change, UDS wind speed. Now, the direction within the storm is set to global, to the ultradynamic weather's global direction. So that means if you do change the direction within the storm movement won't change directions, but the weather, like the rain, will change directions. And I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. So let's hit play here. Let me zoom out. Let me get some space here. So we're starting at the Weeks. I'm going too fast. Starting at the box, we're moving over towards, I think it's at 20,000, so let's see if it works as expected. Okay, so we see our storm. It's moving in the directions we set based on the wind speed of 2, so it's going to move slowly, but it is moving slowly. So we can run over here towards the direction it's going in and kind of sit here and wait a little bit. And it'll slowly come to us. You kind of see it coming towards us. And again, this is calculated, this is the movement duration, which is calculated based on the wind speed and a variable I added over a certain distance. Let's just run towards it a little bit. Okay. Now, if we change direction, as far as the change in directions, the reason that didn't work is because I wasn't, again, it wasn't passing in the current direction directly. So let's just pass in. Let's just pass in the one direction and one speed, which is going to be 2. And let's see how that goes. Get actor class. Oh, it's not connected. So just connect it real quick and see how that goes. So try that again. What's going on there? Is that wind speed? Is that current wind speed coming out of 0? Is that why? should have come out as 2, and it should have worked. Not, I still got a little issues with it, obviously. Let's see. And this is just with dealing with this issues. I mean, you don't really need to watch the rest of the video unless you want me to figure out why this is not working, but it should work. But I've gone over the basics. Let's go to GES and turn off the menu here. Let's see it print that. The initial wind speed is coming out as 0 when it should be 2. Huh. Well, that's something I've got. That's interesting. That wind speed should be 2. Alright, well that's something I've got to change in GES. So let me just disconnect the wind speed right now. So something wrong with that. Let's just put the wind speed at 2. I wanted to show you the direction, how the direction changes. So let me just do that real quick. Let's go back to here. And we'll see what I mean when I say changing the direction. Does it change the direction of the spawn storm? Okay, so let's get into that. But it does change the direction of the rain just like it does when you change it on a regular stormy UDS thunderstorm. So it should change direction as you change direction on UDS. All right, thanks.